and so the mortal world fell away into oblivion. The gnawing rift at the heart of mankind's domain devoured reality. Slowly it spread at first, but then, with the hunger of ravening wildfire, invigorated, great polar rifts slipped their ancient bounds and joined their younger siblings in the feast. The people of the world beheld their doom and screamed in despair. No two watchers beheld the same vision. Some saw skies riven with fire, others saw an ice-cold maelstrom of stars. Others saw colossal tentacles and fanged maws that drooled to the molten stuff of chaos. Perhaps the dark gods raised their champions to demonhood from the battles that raged among the flames. It matters little, for the truths of those hopeless wars are lost. The Oak of Ages was swallowed last of all. Mournful dryad song echoed under the livid skies as Athelloren perished. With its destruction, the weave that bound time and space together thinned and stretched. Twisted by unnatural energies, it dissolved entirely into nothingness. That terrible act of uncreation may have taken the blink of an eye, or unfolded across millennia. The dark gods were not fettered by the flow of time, and thus let it pass unmarked. Already tired of their victory, they began to turn away from the ruin they had wrought, and began the great game anew in other worlds and other creations. But what of tomorrow? What tales yet to be told in the cycle of the stars? These were truly the end times, but they were also the beginning. Act, really. Roll the music!
Every man lives, not every man truly dies.
Yeah. It's an interesting place to be at the moment, as it was back then. Actually, I mean, that the end times. You remember when the end times first came about?
I do.
It was really interesting, wasn't it? I mean, for the longest time, the whole company had been focused on 40k pretty much, because 40k was where it was at.
That's where the money was.
It
was the money maker.
It was where. It was not only the money maker. It was just where people's interests were, because it was just so much more dynamic than the old world was, than Fantasy Battle was. The game was stagnant, the world was stagnant, and then the end times dropped and everything started to change. The topography of the old world started to change. Khemri was basically destroyed. Nagash was resurrected. The Chaos forces finally actually did rampage down from the north and sacked all the cities.
Without an orc kicking Archeon right in the nuts.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, you could so tell when they first did that they were not expecting to happen what happened.
No.
They were so clearly not expecting it to be so wholeheartedly a Chaos victory, so they retconned that pretty sharpish.
But before we get into that, I'm Adam. This is George. Hi, everyone.
Oh, hello.
So, what?
How you doing, guys?
What happened at the Storm of Chaos was that Chaos couldn't get a foothold. If you actually follow, and yes, this is something I have done because I am that kind of person. I got hold of. Right. At the moment, I am currently building up a library of old Warhammer Armies books, old codexes, and old issues of White Dwarf, right?
That's a lot of material. There's a lot of stuff.
It really is. I have 2 giant plastic boxes full of White Dwarfs, right? My first White Dwarf is from 1979. Okay?
Yeah. Bloody hell. So before me.
Yeah, before me. Before my existence.
Well, before you, yeah. Before our existence, wow.
And in reading through the Storm of Chaos stuff, if you look at what the results are, if you follow it exactly as it is done through the games that were played, Archeon never got out of Khemri.
Oh, right, okay. So they never reached the gates of Prague or the Altdorf or whatever.
No.
Oh, right, okay.
They got absolutely reamed in Khemri.
That's interesting.
The Chaos Forces actually got very little in the way of victories. They got destroyed and decimated along the line. So that final battle at... it wasn't Altdorf. Where was it?
I can't remember. It was one of the big cities in the old world. It was the capital city. I can't remember. Cannot remember.
It wasn't Altdorf and it wasn't Nuln. It was... I can't remember.
One of them.
They got absolutely decimated. So the writers did that thing about the Orc chieftain of the time just walking up to Archeon, headbutting him, kick him in the nuts.
Was it Grimgor? Was it Grimgor at that point?
Headbutts him, literally kicks him in the nuts and pushes him down a hill.
It was so bad.
It was awful.
It was so badly done, that was. I mean, there's so many ways they could have done it. I mean, one of the things I did like that they did was that they had Vlad von Carstein surging to the aid of the Empire.
Yes.
Not out of, not out of altruism or anything, but because the Chaos Forces were threatening Sylvania at the time. So there was that, and they could have used Vlad. I'd have been happier if they'd have used Vlad to overcome Archaon than just an orc.
He isn't just an orc. Grimgor was ace, but
no, he's not. He's not just an orc. But for God's sake, this guy's the Ever Chosen.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. The guy has murdered dragons single-handedly. He's fought greater demons of Khorne, almost to the point where he's been murdered by them.
What I would have done
it makes no sense.
I would have gone down the route of this is with hindsight, obviously, but this is my narrative brain working. What I would have done is I would have had Tzeentch taking more favour with Archeon than any of the other powers. Tzeentch is giving him a bit more.
Yeah.
Tzeentch is being a little bit more pushy. Giving him a bit more gifts, that type of thing. Khorne gets sort of angry about this. What are you doing? He's meant to be serving all of us. And so to annoy Tzeentch, he imbues Grimgor with the power of Khorne for a little while. Yeah,
right.
Chaos defeats itself. That's where I would have gone with it.
That would have made a little bit more sense, to be honest. It would have made a little bit more sense than what we got at that point. I mean, to be fair, ladies and gents, this is ages old fluff. This is from the first Storm of Chaos campaign, which was where the seeds of the end times were first planted, really. It's where the notion of the end times first came about. I believe it's the first time where it was referred to as the end times.
When Storm of Chaos came out, the Felix and Gottfried books at the time actually ran concurrent to it. So they were in Kislev in Prague as the biggest Chaos invasion force since the time of Magnus the Pious. Pious? You say tomato, I say tomato. Let's call the entire Warhammer world off. And they actually have this entire book dedicated to an invasion of Prague. And it's a really interesting thing to see when, in the Storm of Chaos campaign itself, Chaos can't do a damn thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get the end times where Chaos did quite a lot.
Yeah, well, the end times was where they really started to shake things up. It was like, obviously, AOS was well into production at that point. There was no notion that AOS was going to come out at that point. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew what was going to happen after the end times. Nobody knew. Only that it was a way of shaking up the game system a little bit and the universe, But the end times were good. I actually really liked the end times. A lot of people did. Like the game really did experience a resurgence at that point. People started buying again. They started playing again. You got all of the really interesting armies starting to crop up back then. Like they reunited all of Chaos, so it wasn't just this factionalized like beastmen, mortals, and demons thing, which I've always hated, by the way. They put together all of the forces of the undead. Because Nagash obviously was resurrected and could control them all. You had the return of Nagash, which was a big thing. Nurgle was massive.
Huge.
Nurgle got more attention than any of the other Chaos powers at that point. He got you got the Maggotkin riders, who I bloody love. I love all of them.
You got the Glothkin.
The Fetid. Yeah, you got the Blight Kings. You got the Glotkin, you got the Glotkin, who were an amazing Love the background for them. Love the background to them, and I love the miniature. It was originally supposed to be a Great Unclean one,
I think
wasn't
so.
it?
Yeah, that's.
From what I understand, it was going to be. It was going to be originally a Great Unclean one, but then for some reason they changed it into being this hyper mutated spawn of Nurgle with its brothers riding on its back.
I love that as an idea.
It's great. It's really, really cool, and their background is good too. I mean, the book that deals with the forces of chaos, which is largely the forces of Nurgle, gives you this really explicit background for all of the Glockkin and the Maggot Riders, and I think they're all great. They're all really cool characters that emphasize different aspects of Nurgle that I really, 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 really love. I particularly like Blobe. I like Blobe. I love the notion that he's not really a man anymore, that he's just like a sack of skin that's infested with demon insects and flies and things.
See, the moment you say to me that somebody is a sack of skin, I'm all there. That's the type of thing that really plays around with the Cenobite that lives in my brain. You know,
it's cool, isn't it? I mean, it's really cool. He is literally just he's not even a man. He is a living swarm inside the skin of a man, riding on the back of this big maggoty monster. It's great. It's great fun. It was the first time that the old world had been shaken up like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the first time we got a proper shake-up since, Third Ed actually solidified the look of the old world. So
to be honest, when the old world sort of took shape, when it got a map, when it became a place, where it wasn't just like, you got mentions of places before. We knew that chaos came from the north and the south. We knew that there was a city called Prague. And that was largely it. Everything else was kind of bitty and all over the place. There's some stuff in the Realms of Chaos books that detail like where certain places are, but they only refer to them. They don't really detail them. It wasn't until Third Ed when you started to get like the stories of Khemri and of Nagash and all of that stuff. When you got Sylvania solidified, you got the capital cities solidified, the Empire, Bretonia, all of that stuff, that you got like a solid sense of the geography of where places are, what the political situation is, and all that stuff. But at that point, it just stopped.
Pretty much. Stuff was added in. So with Fourth Ed, you got Lustria. Bretonia got a bit more of a push, and you got an idea what Bretonia was.
Khemri sort of, although Khemri was there, it was definitely there, it got emphasised when the Tomb Kings came out. It got detailed a little bit more, and the sort of what Nagash did to Khemri became a bit more overt, it became a bit more apparent. You got things like when the undead changed and became the vampire counts, which was a bad move insofar as I'm concerned. There was a bit more about like the lands where the undead operated and what the undead were like. But really, in terms of like a meta narrative, it just stopped dead at Third Ed.
For all intents and purposes, I mean, there are going to be people who are going to point out that things were added, Albion, for example, that type of place. Yeah. But as an ongoing meta-narrative, it kind of found a year of, I think it was like the Imperial year of 3524 or something like that. And that's it. It never moved past that. In the same way that 40k, until recently, never moved past the middle part of the 41st millennium.
Absolutely. There was a real stagnation, wasn't there? There were things like narrative campaigns. There was what was the one that introduced Baelacor? But he was called the Dark Master back then. With the standing stones and the those weird wizards, those druidic kind of chaos wizards. That's right, yeah. And it turns out, because he was called the Dark Master, and it turned out that the Dark Master was actually Baelacor. So that was one of the biggest things to ever happen, the introduction of Baelacor, as the original Demon Prince. And then, of course, you got Archaon, and the whole notion that he's the Ever-Chosen, and that he's going to bring about, he's sort of like a prophesied figure who's going to bring about the end of the world. That is sort of like a slow building meta-narrative that was slowly introduced over time. But even that didn't change things. It was really static, and it was a problem because you had Archaon constantly suspended at this point where he was going to bring about the end of the world, but never did. You know, and it blunted Archaon massively. It blunted the forces of chaos massively. And around that, you had all of the other forces that were just in their own realms, not doing very much.
Yeah, stagnation's the perfect way to describe it, because it's not just in the fluffy that the armies themselves up until end times kind of just sat there. You know, they got redos and rebuilds and new sculpts and stuff, but there was no real push to make something
different or interesting. No, there wasn't. They were very established and enshrined, weren't they, the forces back then? And a lot of the efforts to change them actually went south, insofar as I'm concerned. They made a real mistake with Chaos when they factionalized it.
They made it
when and they split it up into mortals, demons, and beastmen. And now, okay, it's kind of similar now, but in AOS you can because of the game system,
the keyword system,
you can intermingle. You can intermingle the different armies and have these really wonderful, interesting, narratively themed forces that comprise anything you like, basically. But back then you couldn't do that.
No.
You literally just had, if you wanted a Beastman army, you had a Beastman army. If you had a warrior army, you had a warrior army. And if you had a demon army, you had a demon army. And the thing is, the forces of chaos didn't work like that.
No, you needed to have a giant roiling cacophony of sound and troops. It's one of the issues that stopped me from playing Warhammer many years ago, is what you ended up with was one army playing the exact same army.
Pretty much. There were only minor variations,
you
weren't
didn't
there?
get a huge
and that
amount
was
of narrative difference between them, and that
not really. And that was largely because of the game system. It's because of the way it was. It was organised into regiments, so really, it was very much beholden to the historical wargaming from which Warhammer arose. You know, to those very old traditional systems, and it just didn't work. It was rather dull. And also, you could kind of tell who was going to win by the end of turn 2, most of the time.
Yeah.
It was massively predictable. Massively predictable. In comparison to 40k, which was also suffering its own problems back then, but was, as a game system, much more fluid and dynamic, just because of the way you arranged and moved your miniatures on the battlefield, you know? It was suffering. It was really suffering, and that was reflected in the sales.
Yes,
you know?
Warhammer Fantasy Battle nearly tanked the entire company. It was doing so badly.
Well, there's a reason why they got rid of it,
because it was pointless. They were losing money on it, and it wasn't selling. It wasn't getting any real traction with anything. You know, you weren't even getting really that much in the way of licensed gaming for it either until Vermintide came out. And Total War Warhammer. I still think it's a shame they haven't called it Total Warhammer, damn it.
Total Warhammer would make a lot of sense.
It's so much easier to say than Total War Warhammer. And then the end times came around and decimated it. And we've talked about Age of Sigmar in quite a lot of detail over the last 3 years.
We really have,
so I won't bore you too much with that. But
no, we've sort of charted the evolution of it, haven't we, to be honest?
The reason we've kind of gone into this is because yesterday there was a bit of news released, and it, in some ways, I think it's freaking genius what they've done. In other ways, I'm in very much two minds. That bit
likewise.
It's weird. That bit of news is that at some point in the next 3 years, because it's not going to be anytime soon.
No, they've made that very clear. It's not soon.
In 3 years or so's time, Warhammer: The Old World will be released.
Yeah, and we don't know anything about it. We know that it's in some way a return to the old world. So the world that was destroyed at the end of the end times, basically. I mean, I know there's like fragments of it left. but they're only fragments. They're not. It's not like you could go in. It's in the center of the city of Sigmar, isn't it? It's sort of
Sigmarium, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, it's around it, isn't it? Almost like a satellite. It's built around it. Yeah,
it's the core of the old world is kind of sitting there. The life essence of it is in a big rock in the middle of it.
That's right, but it's not the old world. It's not like you couldn't go to that rock and find like Khemri or find Sylvania.
Okay, so Realm Slayer 2, Blood of the Old World, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, spoiler alert, Wii U, Wii U, Wii U. Skip forward like the next 4 minutes, Wii U. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's enough of a spoiler alert?
Oh yeah, I don't do spoiler alerts anyway.
I just thought I was about to drop something without
I
any
find
warning.
It's a whole other conversation, but I hate the notion of spoilers.
I can understand that, but on the other hand, Realm Slayer 2 is so freaking good.
Haven't read it yet.
It's the audio drama, and I recommend because it made me cry.
Oh right, okay.
I'm not kidding. It in the way that the first one made me just like want to throw things at my phone as it was playing it, going, "No, you leave Snorri alone. He suffered enough." The last chapter of Blood of the Old World brought a tear to my eye, and it really affected me quite dramatically. It's ridiculous.
Right.
But yeah, within that story, there is a gate, a realm gate, that goes back to the old world.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, as it was. Okay, fair enough. So there's sort of like a time dilation
something there.
Thing or something. Or is it like the dream of the old world? Is it like I don't know, like the essence of the old world that it's not entirely real, it's not entirely abstract?
That would be my guess, because Thanquol is the one who's keeping it for himself.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. That makes a lot of sense. I kind of like that.
Thanquol is so good. Yeah.
Now, that's a way I can get behind that. As a narrative exercise, I can get behind that. That's the way I thought they might reintroduce it at some point. I'm not entirely convinced or sold on the notion of just doing game systems set in the old world as was.
There's two ways of looking at this, which is we look at it from a narrative point of view, or we look at it from a gaming point of view, right?
Yeah.
From a gaming point of view, I kind of understand what's happening here. I don't 100% agree with it, because my fear is that it spreads people too thin. We're already at that point.
Yeah. Where it takes resources and time and attention away from Age of Sigmar, you know?
However,
and they've done such good work. That's my big problem. They've done such good work removing the not only the gaming system, but the mythology away from what the old world was, you know, and for very, very, very good reason. I find there is a species of nostalgia creeping in to not just Games Workshop, but like culture, which I find to be really poisonous. I find to be really toxic. And I like the fact that they've moved on with Age of Sigmar. And not only have they moved on, they've made something that's wholly better than what the old world was. My fear is that it's kind of the same as yours, Adam, that it will drag it back somehow, or that it will blunt the progression of the Mortal Realms. One of the things I love about the Mortal Realms and the Age of Sigmar game is that they keep changing it. You know, it's dynamic and things keep changing, so it's moved on dramatically from what it used to be. And from what it was just a few years ago, like the topography of the Mortal Realms has changed because of events within the game, because of like campaigns they've introduced and narrative stuff. And I want to see that. I want to see more of that for my money. To be honest, I would like them to just forget the old world. Just forget about it. It's gone. It's had its day. It's done. It's not the 1980s anymore. It's not the 1990s. If they really want to pour resources into something, pour it into a new campaign for the Age of Sigmar, like a big one. something really dramatic and cataclysmic that maybe introduces some new races or new factions of new races, or that reorganizes the races that exist now. I would much prefer that.
Okay. So, all right, I'm going to come at this from the almost a business mind point of view, all right? And this is the stuff that I've picked together over... Seriously, I need a freaking life. This is the stuff I've picked together. So, Horus Heresy, the 30k system, that's coming to an end, right?
Yep, certainly is.
So, the team that are behind 30k are obviously the ones that are going to be moving on to Old World.
Got you,
right?
Got you.
For 30k is first and foremost a tournament-based system. It is a... it's got tons of narrative to it. There is loads of stuff going on, and 30k AdMech, when I was in Warhammer World last month, I swear to God, the idea of starting a 30k Dark Adeptus Mechanicum army really sang to me, because they look beautiful.
Or just the Mechanicum, as they were back then.
However, that is what I think is going to happen. The way that the announcement went last night, or yesterday, I think it's going to be an entirely tournament-based system built on an old version of, well, probably like a mixture of different Warhammer Fantasy Battle editions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That makes a great deal of sense. And as I said before we came on, it kind of depends on what they do with it. I don't want to be entirely sort of dismissive or negative
No, that's
about
not what we do in this show. But we are... No. I think we're both in this...
Cautious.
Yeah, cautious is the perfect word. I think we're both in the same boat here, where we... I mean, I know that I am. I am so heavily into AOS. I don't want AOS to suffer to get the old world back.
And also, I mean, there's a part of me that is just not interested. There's also that. There's the fact that I know there's obviously going to be an appetite for this. I mean, there's entire websites and subcultures that are dedicated to Oldhammer, as it's called, and that's who they're going to be targeting. Obviously, that's going to be the demographic for this. It's going to be people who miss the old world and who miss maybe the old styles of play and whatnot, which is fine. That's a demographic that maybe needs targeting in this regard, and from a business standpoint, would probably make a great deal of sense. But for me, personally, it's had its time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting that you point out the old hammer and the middle hammer guys. I spend a lot of time, because I need a life. I spend a lot of time in the old hammer and the middle hammer groups and doing stuff in there. And if you think about it logically, these are the guys who are now probably later on in life. Kids have grown up and gone. There's probably a bit more disposable income these days. To do a, in quotations, Forge World game is probably going to make a lot of sense. Do I think that Forge World is going to republish or rebuild entire armies? No, that's not doable. So does that mean that Games Workshop are going to republish old armies in plastic? That doesn't seem to be viable, does it?
No, my guess is if they're going to do it, and if it's like far flung in the future, which we know it is, it's like it's going to be at least a year or two before this hits properly. Yeah. My guess is that they will refurbish the armies, so they won't be using like old molds or anything like that. It will be a whole new ranges. Yeah, that would be my guess. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but for me, it's the only way it's going to work. Because a lot of they can't use most of the AOS stuff because it just doesn't work in the old world. You can't have you can have like Daughters of Cain and whatnot. Some of them, even some of them don't work. But you can't have, for example, some of the newer races.
The Ideneth,
for
the
example.
Caradron,
the Caradron, even the Fire Slayers don't work as they are now. You can't have that. It doesn't work. And of course, you're going to have the recoalescence of certain armies, so like the Wood Elves and the High Elves and the Dark Elves and so on.
This is my question, because I mean, that the High Elf range by itself, that's like a 10-year-old... Well, at this point, it's more than 10-year-old range. It doesn't work.
It doesn't really work, and it doesn't exist anymore, does it? So what are you going to do? They're going to have to do something new. And this depends, again, on what they do with it. I mean, one of the things that came up in the Fluffenhammer, the Facebook page, is that maybe it's going to be a smaller scale game.
Sense.
That would make enormous sense to me, because that will not distract attention or time from the AOS fan base or from the resources that go into that particular game. They would be an entirely other thing, and like War Master used to be, or Epic.
Yeah. That's
maybe it will be like that, and that would make a lot of sense to me.
Of course, it would. But it comes back down to the fear of spreading yourself too thin. Look what's on the market now: AOS, 40k, Necromunda, Aeronautica Imperialis,
Blackstone Fortress,
Titus. Adeptus Titanicus, that's the one.
Warcry.
I'm sure I'm missing one here.
Oh, there's loads. There's loads of the games, and it is a fear, isn't it?
You're looking at that now and going, "Hang on, guys. Yeah, I understand what you're doing, but we might need to rein this back in a bit, because."
We may. I mean, for me, it's not even my biggest misgiving. My biggest misgiving is entirely narrative. Yes. It's entirely narrative. For me, the story, but there was the end times, and it was the end times, and it did away with the old world.
Completely. Gave it a send off, and it was done.
It was done. The story has been told, and as we've talked about many times on this show, there was a reason for that. And that's because there were no stories to tell anymore. It was just the same stuff being recycled over and over and over and over. And it does bother me a little. It does bother me. I don't like surrenders to nostalgia. I have a real problem with surrenders to nostalgia. Now, if they were going to take the old world and do something new with it, fine. That could be interesting. That could be really fun, actually. They could retcon a few things and maybe solidify a few things to make it flow into the Age of Sigmar a little bit more. That would make sense. That would be kind of fun. But if it is just a game where you can play in the settings as they were, it's I kind of have issue with that.
We'll get to it when we start talking about some of the stuff that the Facebook group has talked about. But there are ways of getting around that. You have campaign settings that are based in different times in the old world's life. And you don't just retell stories, you expand and create. You get into hello dog. You get into the Empire's excursions into Nippon, or you basically break the restraints of what exists already. Because
Nagash's wars with the Skaven, that'd be kind of fun.
If you're just going to rerun the entire thing again, it just seems so pointless. It's so weirdly pointless.
It does seem pointless. We'll see, though. I mean, I as I said, I don't really want, because we don't know enough. We don't know enough. I don't want to come off as entirely negative.
No, because that's not what we do here.
No, but I do have profound misgivings. I think it's because Age of Sigmar has been such a revelation. It has got me back into the fantasy setting, basically, to the point whereby I could very easily flip between it and 40k on any given day, depending on what's happening, And so much good stuff is happening in AOS. And I desperately don't want this to be a distraction from that.
I think it will. I think it's got its own team. I think it's got its own release schedule, and it's going to have its own budget. I think it's entirely separate.
I hope so.
Because the way it's been announced, plus with we know that Horus Heresy is winding down.
Yes, of course. I mean, in narrative terms as well. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, we're getting now the Solar Wars books, which I'm ploughing through at the moment. They're very big. There's a lot of stuff in those books. So they're actually rather difficult to read, not in a negative way. They're interesting, but they're kind of difficult to read because they are all over the place. Dense. There's dense. Yeah. It's such a big event. there's so much happening at once that the books are everywhere. They're like they're not clean-cut narratives, so they don't follow one character or one group of characters. They flip between lots of sub-narratives, which detail like what's happening on the outskirts of the solar system, where Horus's forces are pouring through at various points. What's happening on Terra with the civilian populations, how they're being drafted, how the entire topography of Terra's being bulldozed, basically, to make way for ramparts and battlements and killing fields and whatever.
Wow.
And it's interesting. I mean, it's one of they're books where you need to come at them from a particular angle to get anything out of them. Because before this, most of the Horus Heresy books have been quite clean cut.
Yeah.
You know, they follow a character or a group of characters, a legion or a chapter or whatever, you know? A particular Primarch most of the time. These ones don't. So one moment, you'll be in a scene with Leman Russ, for example. The next, you'll be with Rogel Dawn.
Right.
The next, you'll be with the High Lords of Terror. The next, you'll be with the Assassin Enclaves. The next, it'll flip to a civilian perspective. There's a character who's been like drafted and is being funneled through all of these processes. They're being handed las rifles that they don't know how to use and whatnot. And then it'll flip to Ahriman.
Right, okay.
In some ship somewhere, you know, performing auguries with his brothers to see how the battle is going to turn out, you know?
So it's basically doing a lot of what Dark Imperium and Plague Garden did, which is just bounce from narrative to narrative to try
very
and tell
much.
a
And don't get
overall
me
story.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, how else are you going to do it?
Yeah, that's it's problematic.
I mean,
to
it's
take on.
I just don't know how else they could have done it. The only other way I could think of is to write stories from the perspectives of everyone involved, like whole books from the perspectives of
all right.
the Sons of Horus, or the Thousand Sons, or the Imperial Fists. And if they did that, then Solar Wars would be as big as the Horus Heresy is already again.
Yeah, and that would just be a bit too much, I think.
Too much. I mean, it's interesting because it's all winding up now. It's all coming to a head, and it's really interesting to see in intimate detail what's happening on Terra, how Terra is responding to this. Because a lot of people on Terra don't even know what's happening.
No, they wouldn't.
They,
would they?
they know that there's a war. They know that Horus is leading it. They know that there's like a civil war going on. But what they don't know is what sparked it. They don't know that there is such a thing as chaos, for example, that Horus's forces they're not just like a military or political force. They're coming with other weapons and other allies, you know? Because hell hasn't properly descended yet.
And the Emperor has kept everything very, very quiet.
Of course he has. I mean, that's another thing you get. There are a couple, very rare, but there are a couple of scenes between the Emperor and Malkador as well. And they are very interesting. Spoilers again, by the way. But there is a particular scene in which whenever the Emperor is involved, they communicate in abstracts because they communicate in psychic terms rather than verbal terms. And the character who is presented as the golden shining warrior is Malkador. And the Emperor is portrayed as this shriveled old man in a black cloak.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, because that changes a lot
say?
of the meta plot.
Yeah. Doesn't make a muchness of it. It doesn't tell you anything about it. It just presents them in those terms. And you're sort of left wondering, what does that mean? What is going on?
Yeah, that's real interesting.
Isn't it? And of course, the Emperor is profoundly absent for the most part from these proceedings, because he is down in the depths. He's trying to fix the damage that Magnus did to the Golden Throne and to the warp gate that leads into the webway through which demons are now spilling. So, yeah, the people who are actually coordinating the defense of Terra, largely it's Rogel Dawn. It is primarily Rogel Dawn. Sanguinius is present, Jagati Khan is present, but they're not really siege masters. They don't really prepare for war in this way, so it's all on Rogel at this point.
That's actually really cool, because I love the stuff you were saying about the Emperor there, but what I find interesting is Rogel Dawn is almost accidentally keeping the secret.
Almost, yeah. And there's a lot of nasty stuff in it as well when it shows you what's happening to the civilians on Terra. Because, of course, they're being drafted. You know, everybody has to fight. There's just no choice in the matter. Yeah. There's no choice. So you've got, like, scribes and whatnot who don't know what the hell is going on, who are being huddled through, the masses are being huddled through these vast subterranean systems and tunnels and onto trains that don't have any space for them. It's really quite horrible, you know? It recalls certain images of actual wars, of what happens during actual wars when there's conscription and whatnot. And it's really, really unpleasant, very cleverly so. But I'm interested to see what's going to happen when it breaks loose, basically. Because all the fighting that's happening is naval at the moment.
It hasn't got down and dirty on the boots on feet.
No.
Boots on feet? Boots on ground.
Not yet. But it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. I mean, I'm reading the second book in the series at the moment, which is called Slaves to Darkness. And basically, the lights are in the sky of the dropships, basically. They're coming now. So that's when it's really going to hit the fan. And I imagine that's when the people on Terra are really going to see what the truth is. Because then they're going to see what's happened to the Emperor's children, who don't look like Space Marines anymore. They're going to see what's happened to the Death Guard, who don't look like Space Marines anymore. They're going to see what's happened to the World Eaters and to Angron. So, yeah, that's when it's going to get frightening, I imagine.
That's going to be really interesting.
But it's interesting
to get to. What I'm fascinated by is what's going to be the last couple of books, because I don't think it's going to end with Horus killing the Emperor.
I don't either. I don't know what they're going to do. I honestly don't. I don't know whether they're going to do the classic thing, where it's like, you know, it's the Emperor versus Horus and all that nonsense. I don't know whether they're going to do that or what. But my gut feeling is they're going to change things quite dramatically.
I think so too. And you kind of have to, because we know that story as has been told many times now. And what the Horus Heresy books have done is try to give you the truth in quotation marks of what happened, you know, the actual history rather than the recorded history, or rather than the myth of it.
So it's slightly it's skewed, isn't it? So you, instead of having like the sort of imperial propaganda myth of what happened, you have the truth, and the truth obviously is way more complex and ambiguous, as it always is, you know, as it always is. And that's fascinating. And it for me, the one scene I'm really looking forward to is that classic, the confrontation between Horus and the Emperor. So what is the reality of that? Because I get the impression it's going to be way, way, way more complex.
I think so. And I think it's also going to be nowhere near as one-sided as has been told.
No.
You know, I don't think it's going to be that Horus basically destroys the Emperor until the Emperor realizes that there is nothing left of the son that he loves. You know, that heroic story of that final self-noble sacrifice. I can imagine it's going to be a lot of the Emperor beating the living hell out of Horus around the room for a bit. Yeah, angry, selfish, childish anger of, what did you do to me? Yeah. What did you do to my plan?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe we'll have the revelation that a lot of people have been waiting for. Maybe we'll find out that the Emperor did plan all this. Maybe. Because that, for me, that's the narrative that makes sense.
It is. The only reason I'm not going down that route is because everybody kind of expects it. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But, I mean, it's either that or the Emperor is far from what he advertises himself as. Yes. You know, far from what he advertised. There are certain things that don't make sense unless that's the case. You know, for me, the big ones revolve around revolve around the traitor legions, okay? So you have the reaction to Lorgar, which drives Lorgar into the arms of chaos. Now, the Emperor must have known that would happen. He must have known, he must have understood that would happen with the destruction of Monarchia and all of, the censorship of the word bearers. He must have known. He either must have known, or he's a little bit thick. He's not as phenomenally intelligent as he proclaims to be. Certainly nowhere near divine. Angron and the World Eaters. Why didn't the Emperor descend with his legions and help Angron fight against the slave owners of Nuceria?
Okay.
They had the means.
Yeah.
They had the means. Why didn't he do that instead of teleporting Angron away? He must have known what that would have done, what that would do to Angron.
Yeah.
He must have known. The censorship of Magnus the Red. He must have known what that would do to Magnus. Especially since him and Magnus are sort of like the closest in soul to one another. He knows Magnus arguably better than any of the others because they communicate on a level that's way beyond all the others. They communicate soul to soul and mind to mind a lot of the time.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff doesn't make sense if you take the established nature of the Emperor, that he's been alive for millions of years, like since the early history of mankind, so he's seen the way things play out. He knows what humanity is. He knows what humanity is like. He knows the psychology and the nature of humanity down to the finest level, yeah? And for the Primarchs, that goes to the nth degree, because not only does he know that, but he created them.
Yeah, completely. He knows exactly which buttons to push and when to back off and when to keep pushing.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
You're absolutely right.
It doesn't, does it? It doesn't make a lick of sense. You also have characters like Night Haunter, right? And Night Haunter knows. From the moment they meet, Night Haunter knows exactly what's going to happen. His first words to his father is, the Emperor says to him when he meets him, something like, "Conrad Kurtz, I'm here to bring you back into the fold," And Night Haunter says to him, "My name is Night Haunter, father, and I know exactly what you have planned for me." So, cool. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Night Haunter suffered with precognitive visions. So there is a degree of predestination happening here. And I wonder if that is going to tie into maybe some of the plans they have for the future of 40k. Because if we do establish that the Emperor maybe knew what was going to happen, maybe those plans don't come to fruition until the end of Psychic Awakening,
maybe. And it does look like whatever Psychic Awakening is going to end with, it is going to be a big game changer for 40k.
Doesn't
massively.
It looks big. I mean, obviously I've pre-ordered Faith and Fury already because I'm a Chaos Space Marine player. I've got to have it, haven't I?
True.
I've got to have it. But what interests me more, especially having read the previous one, is the background. What are they going to do with this one to further the state of, like, say, the current Chaos Space Marine legions? What are they doing? What are they up to? And how are the events of Psychic Awakening actually affecting them?
Yeah.
I'm interested. I want to know the word bearers. For me, particularly, there are two legions in this one that I really want to know about. The word bearers and the Emperor's children. I really want to know what they're up to. And are there going to be any more naughty teases of Fulgrim? Because there've been enough.
I think the answer to that is going to be yes. Yes, there is going to be naughty teasers of Fulgrim now until he actually appears. And they're going to be almost weekly.
Yeah. I think it's likely. They've done it enough, haven't they? I mean, he appears throughout the Cadia books in the background. He's appeared in the Regimental Standard, referred to any number of times. He's already been referred to in the Psychic Awakening books. He's been around. He's there, definitely. He's at large.
And I think when he reappears, it's going to be at the head of at the game changer that we've talked about. I think the rumours of the Imperial Schism are where this is going to end.
I hope so. I would love to see that.
Me too.
And it seems to be like a lot of the rumour mongers are talking about that, aren't they? A lot of the rumour mongers are talking about that Psychic Awakening is going to end with a kind of schism in the Imperium. So you're going to really get this time Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Secundus, or maybe even different factions. I like that. I would love to see that. I would love to see certain elements of the Imperium set against one another.
Yeah, definitely.
I really would. Like the Adeptus Sororitas versus like Robert Gilman and his more secular regime, for example.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. And they've been building that tension for a long time. So why not? Why not? Go for it. Have them be enemies. Why not?
It's the complete flip coin of what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where something was stagnated. What we're talking about now is something that is now so mutable, we have no idea where it's going. And all we can do is
right.
It's...
We don't really know, do we? I mean, we don't really know what Psychic Awakening is going to end on, like what note it's going to end on, and where the forces of 40k and the races of 40k are going to be. I mean, the last one, the one with the Eldari, was really interesting. There's lots of stuff in there that you kind of need to know. Because it does change the state of play for those forces. Particularly with regards to the Inari, who it explains what they're up to.
I haven't read it yet.
It's worth reading.
I really want to.
Well, what it establishes for me is that the Inari are they're a knife edge. They're a coin that's still turning, basically. And they could come down either way. It'll either be what they want, which is the salvation of the Eldari race, or at least they're moving on into a new state of play, or it'll be their annihilation. That's what they represent. That's what they represent, and it's very risky because it's all focused on Yvraine. It's all her. It's all Yvraine at the moment. If something happens to Yvraine before the plan comes off, they're screwed.
Yeah.
She will have effectively damned the entire race, with the possible exception of the homunculi.
So what we could see here is either the Eldari being a race insurgent, or the Eldari being a race corrupted.
Yeah, completely.
Wow.
Completely. And Slaanesh is aware of this as well. Slaanesh is very aware of this, so has agents out there hunting down Yvraine. Most significantly, Shalaxi Hellbane, the big huntress, greater demon from the Hedonites book.
So
she's hunting Yvraine at the moment.
That's really cool.
It is interesting, isn't it? It's really
it opens
interesting.
up so many possibilities, and I'm sitting here thinking, where's this going to lead to? What's that going to be? And there's a lot.
It's hard to say. It's so hard to say. But the books also expand massively what you can do with these armies. So because the Eldari book has the mutable system of the custom craft worlds and cabals and witch cults and homunculi covens, you can sort of go to town these days. You can make what kind of army you like. And that's fascinating. Apparently the Chaos Space Marines are not going to have that system in Faith and Fury. Which is surprising. What that says to me is that there's a book coming. There's maybe a codex coming that will have that system. Or they're working on a codex that has that system because it's conspicuous by its absence.
Right.
The fact they've given it to the Eldari and not
it seems weird, doesn't it? It seems really, really strange.
It does seem strange. And it doesn't seem strange in the way of an error.
No.
Or a mistake. It seems strange in the sense that maybe there's something coming, like a revamped Chaos Codex or an entirely new one, to match the current Space Marine Codex, which would make a lot of sense.
Okay.
Of course, they've got to finish releasing all the supplements for the Space Marine Codex
that's going to take a little while. It's
going to take a little while. Just a little while. I've got to get the Salamanders one and the Imperial Fists one. I really do, because thus far those supplements have been gold.
Yeah, I hear that the Salamander one has been absolutely brilliant.
People are loving that one.
Yeah,
they're really loving that one. They're all good though. They're all good. I mean, they allow them space. They allow them space to explore the individual chapters, which they don't really have when they're all crammed into one codex.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that interests me there is that when's the last time the Salamanders got any real love?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I mean, there are certain ones that just always get short shrift. There's the
Legion of the Damned.
Yeah, the Legion of the Damned are going to have their own supplement, aren't they, by all accounts? That's really
I will
interesting.
be buying that the moment it hits.
Yeah.
I love the Legion of the Damned.
Yeah, me too, right? The Salamanders, they often get very little love. The Raven Guard, God, they almost became like a tertiary chapter at one point. True. The Black Templars don't really get any love, so they've got a lot of stuff in Faith and Fury, by all accounts. The Iron Hands, really, they got very little love up until recently, and their supplement is bloody brilliant.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say the Iron Hands is my favourite thus far, because the Iron Hands makes the Iron Hands really ambiguous.
Okay.
There's all of this schism in the Iron Hands. They're constantly fighting one another, because they have these ideological schisms. There are those that are fanatics and believe that the Iron Hands... they believe basically what the Adeptus Mechanicus believe, which is that their humanity and their flesh need to be purged, and they need to ascend to the purity of a machine state, yeah? And then there are the Iron Hands that follow the true teachings of Ferrus Manus. That is, that they need to achieve a balance.
Right, yeah.
And that one shouldn't supersede the other. Yeah,
do not cross the singularity.
Exactly. And as a result of that, there are these cults and schisms within the Iron Hands that fight against one another, literally fight against one another sometimes.
Right.
There have actually been schisms that have almost torn the chapter apart several times because of these ideological conflicts.
That's really interesting.
Isn't it cool?
Yeah,
I love that.
I might have to go and pick that book up on my way to work today.
There's even this really wonderful thing where it suggests that the those Iron Hands that are more machine-like and believe fanatically that the machine should replace the flesh have been infected by a kind of scrap code.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
And that it's that's driving them to their fanaticism.
That's
really interesting.
Really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Really, really cool. For me, they're the most interesting thus far.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it's ambiguous and they're kind of dangerous, and a lot of the other chapters don't like them.
I think
a lot of Imperial forces don't like serving with them.
I can understand that, because which version of it you're going to get?
Exactly, and they're mercurial. You know, they're a bit like the Dark Angels in that regard. They're really mercurial. They follow their own agendas, their own belief system. They are under the eye of the Inquisition a lot. The Inquisition hate them, by all accounts, because of their peculiar beliefs. They are that close to being declared excommunicate.
Right. Okay.
That close, you know. Tiny. They're just on the edge.
So they're about 3 steps away from becoming a renegade chapter.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's fascinating stuff, and I like that. I really love that ambiguity.
That sounds like something I'm really going to have to get into.
But
I'm just aware that we're getting on with time a little bit here.
We are, yes. Anyway, yes. So, I mean,
the last thing I wanted to do today, I say last thing. There's always the end of the show as well, but the last thing I wanted to do was I put out a thing on Facebook, asking people for their thoughts about the return of the old world. Right?
Yep.
So I've got a couple of answers here that I'm just going to go through, and we'll have a discussion about it. So, Ronald Clark says, it's ridiculous. They killed that setting already, and the amount of mental gymnastics and retcons necessary to revive it will be staggering. They are literally beating a dead horse, hoping money falls out like a rotting piñata. There, I said it.
It's kind of a fair point. He does have a point there. I mean, for me, it depends on what they do with it. It does depend on how it manifests. But I do largely, generally agree with the sentiment.
I mean, it'll be a historical thing, so to speak, won't it? Yeah, it's not going to be that the old world has returned. We're going back to a time that has already passed. It's basically, for all intents and purposes, it's to get that money that Ninth Age has been getting. Well, I say money. Ninth Age doesn't really get any money. It's a free-to-use system. But it's to go up against the Kings of War and all that type of thing. Which, by the way, have you seen Mantic's video that they put out yesterday? It just basically says, we build worlds, don't destroy them. Kings of War 3 coming soon.
Ooh, and it's just like, that's a shot across the bows a little bit.
It was very tasty.
Yeah, shot across the bows. Wow.
Yeah, I think Ronald here is correct in a lot of ways, but I also think that there are ways of making it work.
There are. I mean, for me, it's too early to say. It's a wait-and-see thing. But I do agree generally with the sentiment. I really do. I mean, I still would prefer the old world to stay dead, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I really would.
Christopher Carlson says, one more time then, my money is on a War Master reboot, as it's great for moving rectangles around and won't eat AOS's lunch. Plus, then you can get all those Total War players into the hobby. They love having epic fights. But failing that, I luckily still have my 5th edition Lizardmen army. I did jump to 40k after they became blue nudists back in the day, but they are still good to go.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this is what we mentioned before. If they do it in that way, if it is sort of like the War Master scale, fine. Yep. You know, it's something I can sort of ignore because it's just not my thing. I'm not interested in that scale. Yeah, I hope that's kind of what they do, to be honest. If they're going to do anything, that's kind of what I hope.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Chris Hayton says, I don't play the game, but prefer old world lore to AOS's, so I'll definitely be buying some boxes of Bodie Boys. God, I love alliteration.
Right, okay.
Sorry. I know that's not the point he's making, but I do love alliteration.
Yeah, and that's that kind of suggests the alternative, doesn't it? That there is an audience out there for the old world and whatnot. I get that. I really do get that. And if that's the case, and if they tap it well, then fine. Catering to both is fine. It's okay. You know, I understand that because there's nothing forcing you to play either one.
It's a premier hobby for all intents and purposes, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
absolutely.
Go, everything that we've said is just our thoughts and feelings, you know. We're not
absolutely.
You know?
No. No, it's entirely subjective, isn't it?
Tim Montgomery says, by the way, I love your name, Tim. That's a great name.
Montgomery is a great name.
It just rolls off the tongue so well.
It's really cool, isn't it?
Say it with me, Tim Montgomery.
Yeah, it's lovely. Lovely, lovely name.
Sorry, Tim. I just kind of got hung up on your name.
Tim.
I really enjoy saying it. Tim Montgomery. Oh, man, it's so good. He says, used to play Bretonians. Loved Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
Right.
It was a totally different game to 40k. You had to think differently, units work differently, different tactics. When GW crapped all over the old world, never once looked at AOS. That's a shame. That's a shame because...
That is a shame. I would advise doing so.
AOS is great.
I really would. My suggestion would be, if you pick up nothing else, pick up the 2.0 core book and just read the background. That would be what I suggest, because it's absolutely stunning. That book
is.
It really is. The background is just so good, and just on a writerly level, looking at it as a writer, as a world builder, better. It's just better than what they did with the old world, because technically the old world is just it's a mishmash of lots of influences.
It's
it's Tolkien and it's Tolkien, Moorcock, Lovecraft, all just thrown together. Whereas AOS, although the influences are still very clear, it's trying much harder to be its own thing.
Yes, very much so. Moving on, James Norfolk Sinnis says, as much as I enjoyed the old world and loved my Empire lads, I really loved the boundless potential and possibilities of the mortal realms. One of the old world's faults was how fixed and stagnant it was. There was very little development. I mean, I'm the same period of time, 40k. In the same period of time, 40k was very stagnant, but there was potential for growth. There wasn't in the old world due to the confines of it being a singular world. Like, I grew up playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but I prefer Age of Sigmar.
Likewise, that's kind of pretty much where I am.
I did actually try to get James to see if he was free this morning to come and join us, but unfortunately not. Because
such a shame. Would have loved to have spoken about that.
That man has thoughts.
Well, I follow his politics because we're very similar.
Yes, it's
we're very similar politically. I follow that quite closely.
There's a trifecta of political following going on here. Anyhow,
I think so. But yes, I agree. It's a case of looking at the old world with sentiment, as I do a lot of franchises and media from when I was a kid, but recognizing its faults. and
We've
flaws.
discussed it in the past. Nostalgia can be a dangerous route to go down because it
Really
puts you in a
dangerous.
position where you begin to fear change.
Yeah.
And once you start to fear change, something will stagnate, something will die. Yeah.
It also blinds
Yeah.
you. It puts blinkers on. Like it's like when you get like a new iteration of an old cartoon, for example. A very good example is, say, the Netflix
Yeah.
She-Ra, right? Now, the Netflix She-Ra is objectively better than the original show. And when I say objectively, what I mean is in terms of its technicals. Its writing, its animation, its direction, the meta-narratives. It's just objectively better. That doesn't mean that if you enjoy the original show better, that you're wrong. That's your subjective reaction, yeah. But objectively, the new She-Ra is better. Like there's no contest. You can't even compare them. The old She-Ra was designed to sell toys and made on a shoestring budget, so it's got like recycled animation, it's terrible plots, awful voice acting, the whole shebang. And it's when people, because they have nostalgic attachment to the original She-Ra, because they grew up with it, can't see that the new one is objectively better.
Yeah.
You can say with complete legitimacy that you prefer the original one because of your sentimental attachment to it, because of your nostalgia. But that doesn't mean that it's objectively better. And this is the problem. This is the problem people have with nostalgia, I find, and with media in general. You can say you prefer something because you have a particular attachment or reaction to it without proclaiming it to be objectively better when it clearly isn't.
I totally agree.
Do you see what I mean? This is the difference. There is, when you compare and contrast the two shows, there's just no comparison. There is no comparison. The new She-Ra is designed to tell a story and it enjoys its characters, it revels in its characters and its interactions and its mythology, whereas the original one is just a toy catalogue. It's an extended toy catalogue.
I will, of course, make the argument that He-Man 2002 was better than everything.
Of course it was. Well, that's another good example. He-Man 2002 is objectively better than the original show. It is objectively better.
Do you know what the only thing the original She-Ra and He-Man have that's better than the 2002 reboot and the current She-Ra reboot? Painted backgrounds.
Painted backgrounds, yeah. I will go for the painted backgrounds, yeah, absolutely. But absolutely. But it's a strange thing when people have those blinders on, they have those blinkers on because of nostalgia, when they will say that, like, oh, cartoons in the 80s were so much better. They weren't.
They weren't.
They objectively weren't. They were designed as toy catalogues in a sort of mid-Reaganite and Thatcherite era. They were designed to sell you plastic.
To sell product.
As a result, that's what they were. That's exactly what they were.
And I think what you can find as well is that if you allow yourself to be nostalgically blinkered in your medias that you enjoyed from when you were a kid, you kind of start to believe that your childhood was better than life is now. And that then starts to affect other parts of your life.
It's so dangerous. It's so dangerous.
Because you then stop allowing yourself to look at the world around you as is and see it more as a pale imitation of what you think it was when you were younger.
Exactly. And and I think we've spoken about this before on the show, but once again, memory is a bad medium. It's a bad medium, especially when it comes to memory that informs your sense of self. You have no objectivity on it. You have absolutely no objectivity on it because you can't. It's mind attempting to analyze mind, or self attempting to analyze self. It can't be done. It is a paradox.
Becomes an Ouroboros. It feeds itself constantly.
Exactly. And also, the instrument of analysis is the same as the subject of analysis. You see, which is impossible.
It's like getting a microscope to look at itself. It's impossible.
Exactly.
You cannot do it.
It's impossible. You can't take your sense of self, put it aside here, and then look at all of the various threads of influence that inform and shape it and say, oh yes, so that comes from that, and that's why I think this way, and that comes from that, and that's... It doesn't work. You can't do it because you're too invested in it. It is you. It is part of who you are. And therefore there is no objectivity. It's actually the point at which the very delusion of objectivity breaks down.
The only way it works is when you take outside tools and apply them to your own thinking process in the terms like self-reflection and things like that.
That's right.
Outside of that, though, if you are just using the tools that you know that you already have, the skills you already have, that you have learned through experiences you've had, to look back at the experiences you've had in memory, what you then get is something that feeds itself, and often feeds itself negatively because there's no way of breaking the cycle.
Well, there's investment there as well, isn't there? I mean, the human mind is such that as it develops, it actually develops profound bias, massive bias towards the narrative that it wants to maintain, whether it's true or not. Which is why we delude ourselves into thinking that we recall certain things so clearly, and they went this way, and they meant this, and that people acted this way, people acted that way. And in truth, that's really not the case. It's why, taking it slightly deeper, it's why after relationships break up, for example, that most people, not everyone, but most people tend to demonize the other in their own minds and to other people. It's often, relationships are really complex, and very often it is not because one person did this or because one person did that. It's lots of things. It's massively complex, it's ambiguous, and very often it's just circumstantial. It's just that you or they or both of you weren't right at that time for one another, and that's the end of it, But what happens in the aftermath of breakups, because they're so traumatic, your mind starts to repair the scars, it starts to seal them up, but it papers over them with these delusions that, the other person was evil. They did this and they did that, and they were bad and they were terrible. And in some circumstances, that's true. That is definitely true. But it's never the whole truth. It's never the whole truth. And in most situations, I imagine it's not the truth at all.
It's the brain, the brain part of you. It sounds like the brain's an entirely different person. The brain has it's an egotistical tool. It does everything it can to make you feel better, and thus make itself feel better. I'm talking about as if they're two separate things. It's not. It's one controllable system, one interconnected system. But you get what I'm saying. And
absolutely.
In this case, it has to demonize the other party in order to make you feel worth.
Yes, to protect itself.
And that's why the brain has a tendency of doing that. We have got into some heavy-duty psychology here.
But it's good. It's good. I mean,
this is my bread and butter. This is what I do for a living,
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating, isn't it? It is absolutely fascinating. And of course, in any objective sense, if you could sort of see it, if you could see the situation externally, if you could sort of float outside of it, free of bias, free of investment, you would see that actually people don't tend to react. They don't tend to act terribly or brilliantly. It's a complex situation where there are lots of different factors that you can't control that are acting upon it, that force situations like a breakup or like a whatever. It's just way more complex than that. And nostalgia works in the same way. We're invested in the memories and the experiences that we believe or that we come to assume inform our sense of self. So we tend to idealize them. Yes,
exactly.
It's why you get those, and I fucking hate them. Every time I see them, I want to claw my own eyes out. Those, those memes on Facebook that have pictures of old toys or old cartoons. If you know what this is, you had a great child. Fuck off.
Do you know what my favourite one of that is?
Honestly.
It's a caveman stabbing a mammoth. If you remember this, your childhood was awesome.
Yes,
that's my personal favourite of those versions. Cause,
that's,
No, I agree.
Well,
because what you're doing there is you're putting a financial limit on what your childhood's worth is. Who gives two damns if you had an Optimus Prime when you were a kid? My finest memory of being a kid is the first time I ever saw snow, aged 11. Because living in a hot country, you didn't get a huge amount of snow in the middle of a desert.
Of course.
That's got nothing. That was like a cheap little toboggan that me and my dad found and cleaned up. They went up into the lakes and then tobogganed for a couple of hours until we nearly died of frostbite. But that's beside the point.
I get it. I mean, it's people say, well, that's meant as a joke. Well, yeah, it is, but that misses the underlying motivation, which is a kind of paedophobia. Yeah. It's a kind of demonization of the young. It's basically, which is pervasive in our cultures, by the way.
Well,
we don't
what
realize.
What are you saying there, George? Are you saying that the old hate the young? My God!
I'm really sorry, Adam, but that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. I am aware. I've had that argument many times this week.
That is exactly what I'm saying. It is pervasive in our cultures. We don't realize it because that's how we grow up. We assume that it's normal. We assume that that's the way things are. We don't even perceive it. And when you point it out to people, they get angry. Especially if they have kids of their own, they get angry. But then they don't understand that we have things like enshrined violence against children, which you don't get against any other demographic, by the way. If a man if a husband hits a wife, it's illegal. If a parent hits a child, it's not. There is something profoundly evil there. There's something profoundly wrong. We have things like the lack of space for adolescents.
Yeah.
In this culture, there is nowhere for teenagers to go. There is nothing that caters to them. There's nothing that talks to them. In fact, what we do with teenagers in particular, the minute children hit the age of 11, we demonize them completely. Completely. They are less than human, Their struggles, their problems, their concerns, their issues are completely denigrated in this culture. Completely denigrated. Up until the point they become of taxable age.
These are the best days of your life, don't waste them.
Oh,
no, they're not. They're really not.
I want to murder people who say that.
Yes, yeah.
I really do. For numerous reasons. For one, it's the fact that you are universalizing your own experience, which just
as we said
lost.
before, is a heightened version that you've placed on a pedestal, forgetting all the negatives that went with it.
It's a delusion. It's an egotistical delusion, is what it is. It's bordering on narcissism. It's bordering on the narcissistic, in a very literal way,
it's absolutely true, and I think it's one of those things that's ingrained into society. It's something that we don't decide that we're going to do day in, day out.
No,
but the way that we are pushed, especially once you hit your 30s and so, you're kind of pushed if you are not already bought a house and in a great job and you've got 3 kids and 2 cars, you're kind of made to feel that you are somehow a failure. And that, I think, is why you have this constant push, this pressure to be seen, not to be a success, but to be seen as a success.
That's the point, isn't it? And in a very narrow way.
You have to
sacrifice the way you define
so
success
much to be able to do that. And so when you've got the carefree younger generation coming through, there's that resentment that takes place.
There is a resentment, isn't there? There is a resentment.
And from that, that's where a lot of it comes through. It's nobody's fault other than the greater society that we live in.
It's actually a systemic violence.
It's a pandemic, is what it is. At the end of the day,
the systemic violence towards the young is unbelievable. It really is. It's getting worse. It's actually getting worse. But we do live in a culture that largely hates its young.
Well, we know that.
I mean, we know that
hates itself.
That's it. Yeah, that's absolutely it.
The entire right. We're going to get back to the answers in a minute. I promise.
We will. I mean, it's related, though, isn't it? It is related because there is this, underneath the resurrection of the old world, there is this nostalgia. There is this nostalgia, which nostalgia has reached a point for me in culture where it's at critical mass, where it is actually being used as a kind of basis for systemic violence. And it's poisonous. It is absolutely poisonous. And this may seem like small potatoes because it's a hobby, it's a game.
But it's a part of a larger issue that's taking place.
It is. It's feeding into, or it's an expression of the same disease, potentially.
Yeah, because what you get on almost every level of life now is this idea that things were better back then. when the
yeah, which just do the research.
Yeah, and I am
for God's
dancing
sake.
around quite a lot here, so I'm not going to get into them.
No, absolutely not. But just go and read accounts of like what it was like to be poor in the early 1980s or the mid 1970s. Yeah.
Well, there is a reason.
These
right?
eras.
There was a reason I was born in Africa. The reason I was born in Africa is because my parents were working 3 days a week jobs because they couldn't get actual work. My dad was a gas turbine engineer, right? So we're not talking like he wasn't qualified to do anything.
No.
And my mother was a teacher, right? And neither of them could get full-time work, which is why we fucked off to Africa, and that's why I was born there. Yeah. The reason I lived in Dubai is because during the early part of the 80s, you could not get work in this country. Right?
No, absolutely not.
And once again, I have to point out the fact my dad was a gas turbine engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, so specialised job, you know, really like important, specialised, skilled work.
You know. But anyhow, right, let's move on.
Anyway, that's I think that really does delve deep into why my reaction, and yours I imagine too, Adam, not wanting to impose my own reaction on you, was so ambiguous to this.
Yeah, I think so, because I am always wary about falling down that trap.
Yeah, me too.
One of the things that keeps me well, basically, that makes it sound a lot worse than it actually is. I get quite a lot of anxiety and depression, and have done since I was like 12. You know, it's
likewise.
By anxiety, I don't mean I'm not going to get too much into it, obviously, because I don't really want to air a lot of that. But I get self-anxious. I will feed my own brain with my own negativity until destruction. And one of the things that I've put into place over the years to combat that is the ability to withdraw myself from something and look at it from a further away point of view, and then be able to decide from there. And it's now second nature to me. So when something like this happens, I will always draw myself back and look at it from that further point of view to see, is this a healthy thing to be looking at? And it's just part of the genetic makeup of who I am.
It's a good way of doing it, you know? It's stuff like, you know, I mean, things like, say, arguing on the internet with people in comments or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
I have a tendency of doing that, and I really shouldn't.
A lot of people can't disengage from that. And it's obviously causing them distress. Yeah. It's obviously causing them anxiety, but a lot of people can't just let it go, you know? I used to be like that. I used to be like that a lot, like in my 20s, you know? But I reached the point where I realized that this is taking energy away from me. It's taking time, and it's pointless. It's fruitless. So stop.
Yeah. So moving on to some happier things.
Yes.
Andrew Colomb, I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. So what I've read is this. It's going to be a re-release of one of the older fantasy rule sets with a few tweaks, possibly something similar to the 9th Age rule set. They did similar with the Heresy, adapting it from a fan-based rule set. Release-wise, they will be doing it via campaigns, basing a lot of the releases on a single battle or campaign from the old world's history. We'll probably see some new character miniatures released with each setting based around some old classic models but with a Forge World twist. They'll also throw in some other homemade characters to the list, some with models, others without. I would look at some of the Black Library books for ideas of characters and settings.
Okay, I mean, I could sort of see how that could be appealing, because you could get like older versions of Nagash, for example, where he isn't quite as like epic as he is now. You know?
Yeah.
Where he's a bit more ground-based, perhaps, where he actually walks, maybe.
Actually, that's interesting, because the next comment from we have so many people on the group who have amazing names. I just want to point this out. From Jeffrey Dowrick.
That's very cool.
I like saying that one as well. Jeffrey Dowrick.
Yeah.
I've always wanted a 30k style game of Warhammer set when Sigmar was just a man uniting all the different tribes. The Dwarf Nation was young, orcs were new to the world, and Skaven didn't exist. So massed ranks of tribesmen from all the different areas of what became the Empire fighting each other.
That's kind of cool.
I'm in for that. That's great.
That is kind of cool, because that is actually an area of the old world where it's only ever been historical. Yes. They've never actually been miniatures from that era.
No, there hasn't.
So that actually makes sense.
Bless Andy Millman. He says, Praise Andy Millman.
Praise Andy Millman. Praise Millman.
Could this mean a reissue? He's going to hate me so much. I love praising Millman. It's so much fun. Could this mean a reissue of older army books, like the Dogs of War getting their OG book out again? What old school army book would you be after? The old Realm of Chaos books would be an easy sell to many.
Actually, that's a fair point. Yeah, they would. They would. I mean, we already saw with the re-release of the of Slaves to Darkness that sold like gangbusters,
really did.
didn't it? People wanted that.
It was also the only one that
Lost
was
in the
left
Damned.
over when I was at Warhammer World.
Yeah.
Lost in the Damned and Rogue Trader were out of print. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah. I mean, can they not reprint Lost and the Damned? Has it been lost
No,
or something?
it's there. It's just it's not there yet. So.
Right. I mean, I've got a copy. It's just that it's falling to bits.
I
My
need
copy.
a copy quite badly.
Me
Same
too.
with Rogue
Me
Trader,
too.
because my copy is dead.
Mhm. Yeah. Held together by sticky
Held
tape
together
at the
with
moment.
spit
Mine.
and hope, I think.
Yeah.
Nick Davidson.
Yeah. I mean, the notion that there could be like old books and things. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of cool in and of itself. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if we got things like the Nippon book, I know I keep coming back to Nippon. The reason for that is that their emperor is a dragon, and I really want to know what that's like.
Yeah.
Which fascinates me. But also things like the Kislev book, the dwarf books. If you could get a greatest hits book together, I would be all over that.
That'd be cool. Yeah, that would be quite fun, actually.
Nick Davidson says, I'm struggling to see how it could be a gateway game to AOS when it seems that it will use square bases, which suggests rank and file. What changes are coming to AOS? Are we going to have a choice of basing options? Are they releasing official movement trays for new Warhammer Fantasy Battle or AOS? Is it even a version of Warhammer Fantasy Battle? It seems odd to me to split the fantasy player base like that. AOS is in a good place right now and still growing.
That's
it could
true.
stunt AOS's growth and popularity, and even if it is just a straight reboot of Fantasy Battle, there is no certainty that current 9th Age players will move to it. It could be something as simple as a campaign setting in army books, but the bases have thrown me, and we simply don't have enough info to go on.
It's true. We don't really know what they're doing at the moment. I doubt very, very, very much that they'll be changing like AOS.
No, I think AOS
that
is
fundamentally.
too built in, and
it's too fluid. It's too much part of how the game works to have the rounded bases. So
and also AOS is doing gangbusters. It is selling really, really well. It's doing brilliantly.
It would be foolish to undercut it
Massively
now.
so. And then finally, David Johnson says, it's just too far away to know anything. Who advertises this 3 years in advance? Rumours contradict. War Master, Fantasy Battle, tweaked rules like Blood Bowl and 30k versus brand new rulebook, buying 9th Age and taking their rules. Will AOS armies be in it, or is it limited to old world armies like 30k is to...
It should be limited to old world armies, really. If it is set in the old world, it should be limited. You should not get Ideneth Deepkin.
No, you should not, because it doesn't make sense.
For example.
The only thing that is worth noting is that social media guys have done an amazing job, because look at the conversations and comment sections. Also, Mantic released a reaction video, which was very humorous.
Yeah, I like the fact there's a little bit of cat's claws coming out.
I will put the Mantic thing up on at some point, because it's absolutely brilliant, and it just makes me laugh so much.
I quite like that. I'm quite amused by that.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, they are poking the giant here, aren't
Of course
they?
they are.
It's because it's Games Workshop. Bloody hell, So that's really the crux of it. It's too early to tell.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's very much it.
Apart from like conceptually, how do you react to it conceptually? And conceptually, massively ambiguous.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and as has been said, it's so early on that we don't know anything, and everything that we say is literally just pulling strings together to see what we can come up with. But I think
it's speculation, isn't it? Largely, it's just speculation.
But the moment it hit, my first thought was, I need to talk to George about this, because this is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it's aroused a very great ambivalence. That's all I can say. Great ambivalence. I do not know how I feel about it. There's a part of me that's erring very largely on the negative at the moment, conceptually, and that's simply because of a bias towards AOS.
I'll agree with you on that one. I mean, AOS started, I was curiously optimistic, I think would be the word. You know, it's just, what is this and why is this? This feels a little, but
I had to wait and see with AOS. I had to
same.
wait for it to ferment a little bit and to rise and to become something a bit more coherent in and of itself. But now I think it's great. Now I think it's absolutely wonderful. You know,
it excites me in ways that Warhammer Fantasy Battle hasn't done since I was I don't know, 12. 13, somewhere.
This is the thing, isn't it? It is going to be an uphill struggle for certain players. It's going to be an uphill struggle to reignite that passion, if that's what they're going for.
Yeah, and it is going to be difficult. And I think there are plenty of people out there who dislike the rule sets and things for AOS on a conceptual level, you know, at the base level.
Yeah.
This isn't for me. Yeah, and that's fine. You know, not everything's going to be for everyone. And if re-releasing a rank and file game is going to be the thing that brings you back in, brilliant. You know, that's
fine. You know,
that's absolutely
my sincere hope for that though is that it does act as a gateway and it does get them into the AOS. That is my sincere hope. Yeah,
I've always been a skirmish gamer over rank and file. I prefer skirmish games.
Yeah, me too. I do not like rank and file. I find it boring.
It's not as much boring. It's easier to get narrative out of a skirmish game than it is out of two armies that are pretty much the same, whacking each other to death.
Yeah,
you know, it's
Anyhow, I just get more joy out of it.
Definitely. So moving on then. What we're going to do now is just say, George, tell the nice people at home where they can find you and all of the wonderful things that you do. I don't know why I said that like you were Tigger. I do apologise.
Yeah. I'm not going to respond like Tigger. Definitely not. I don't think I could do the Jim Cummings voice for one thing. You can find me on the Exaggerated Elegy channel where I do all sorts of stuff. There's lots of different podcasts on there. There's Strange Playgrounds. There's What the Hell is Wrong with Us, where I talk with various people about various different subjects, usually erring towards the disturbing or the fantastical. You'll also find video game Let's Plays on there because I enjoy doing those. They sort of help me let off steam. You can find me at strangeplaygrounds.com where you'll find articles, reviews, and links to my published fiction. You'll find my short story collections on Amazon.co.uk and .com. Particularly very proud of Born in Blood Volume 1 at the moment. Please go and check that out. And if you do, leave a review of it, please, if you would. You can also find me at the Twitter feed Enigmatic Elegy, which is just musings, really. It's just musings and comments, and you'll find links to articles and stuff there too. And I think that's it for me.
As for myself, I eat, breathe and sleep Fluffenhammer at the moment. I am currently working as editor for something interesting.
Okay.
I'm not going to say any more than that, actually. Something that I've worked on in the past. I don't have time anymore to be on, but I'm working as an editor to get it out.
Interesting. Interesting.
I'm just leaving it there. Outside of that, go to the Fluffenhammer on YouTube because we now, at this point in time, have at least one story a week coming out until February. And we have the Necromunda Historica, which is looking at all the bits of Necromunda that you don't know about. And some of that is amazing. Like, did you know, for example, George, that one of the Helmar, House Helmar leaders once moved his entire family underground so the moons would stop shouting at him?
It's as good a reason as any. I don't see any particular problem with that. Maybe they have very noisy moons on Necromunda. I don't know.
Maybe they do. I've been thoroughly enjoying doing these. It's been quite good fun. I've got other stuff. So Tales of Forbidden Power has now just finished. So by the time you hear this, the next long story should be out, which means I now only have one story left from the Deathwing anthology to do. And then after that, the Tales of Vigil stories will finish, the last batch of them. Then you should have another long story. And then after that, we begin Psychic Power. Because this doesn't end. This doesn't end.
Definitely not. You've got a lot of material with Psychic Awakening.
Yes. Psychic
Awakening.
Yeah.
Lots of material.
I have next to me, right, literally no word of a lie, I have next to me a pile with little bookmarks within them for everything I want to get done as a reading, right? The pile comes up to my thigh.
Nah,
Right?
it would. At the moment, it would, because those stories are escalating.
That's not even beginning the stuff that I have on the computer, like Psychic Awakening and all that type of stuff. That's right.
Yeah.
This is just the stuff that I think, oh, that'll be a good one to do, that I haven't got to yet. Yeah, there's that much. I've got probably about 3 years worth of material waiting to go. To get
Fantastic.
Done, yeah.
So that's sort of charting the course for the Fluffenhammer for the next 3 years.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. Absolutely insane.
Brilliant.
Right, so with all that being said, we're going to get out of here. Thank you very much for joining me today, George.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. Needed to be talked about.
I think so, yeah. I think it needs to be talked about sooner rather than later.
Definitely. My pleasure.
And of course, thank you to all the guys involved. You guys take care now.
Always. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Excellent.